Grace kids, another day, and it's kind of rainy outside, but that's okay. I like the cleansing that the rain gives, and it's just so beautiful afterwards. It's also green, so I hope you could be able to look outside and enjoy the rain that God does. And just with that idea of cleansing, there is a cleansing for sin that we need. And what we're going to be talking about today is rules for sacrifice and why there was sacrifice back in the Old Testament and what sacrifices was needed today. And do you still need to sacrifice? So that's the question that we need to present ourselves. But we're going to be getting this from Leviticus. And I know that is a long book for you to be able to read. But this is where it's all based out of. So in Leviticus, this is where we find it. And we're going to find that God is holy and requires a sacrifice for sin. Now, our verse that we've been reading is Exodus 15:2. The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him in habitation, my father's God, and I will exalt him. Okay, he's my strength, my song, and my salvation. Okay, I want to exalt him. I want to praise him. How have you been praising God today? Do you recognize God as your salvation, as your strong song, as your strength? Do you recognize that? As we get into this today, again, what we talk about is what is worship? That's been our question for the last couple of lessons. What is worship? Worship is celebrating the greatness of God. And God is surely great in his grace, in his mercy, his love, his care, his concern, his holiness, his justice, there's his righteousness. There's so much that he is great for that we should be praising him for. All right? So, what are we talking about? When Moses was on Mount Sinai, God gave a load of other rules and laws that the people were supposed to follow. Why? Because it was supposed to show them how to live a holy life. Why? Because God is holy. God's holy. And he can't be around sin. And Israel isn't perfect. And so Israel needs to make things right. And how do they do that? So God met with Moses in the tabernacle. And he gave them rules on how to live, how to worship, and what to do if they sin. Because we know that we sin. Now, what do we need to do because of that sin? Okay, so the first rules he gave is about offerings. Offerings that gifts that people can give to God. And they could be money, jewelry, animals, grain, bread. So there's different types that they could give. There was different types of offerings for different times. So if they were going to praise God, they would give burnt offerings. If they were sorry for their sin, they sinned and they were sorry for it, then they would give sin offerings. Now the second rules were about priests. And the priests made the sacrifices that God commanded. They took care of the tabernacle. And they taught God's rules for living holy lives. Who were these priests? It was Aaron and his sons. Now as we go on, you say, what are they most like today? Well, these priests were teaching how to live life God's way. It's kind of what a pastor does. But it's very different in the sense of what the priests, they did the offerings, they took care of those. Pastors don't take care of sin offerings anymore. We don't take care of that. And the reason for it is what we're going to get to here very, very soon. But this is what they did. They took care of the tabernacle, make sure it was all packed up and set back up and clean, and then they teach the people. They were spiritual guides during this time. And then there was one special time a year. It was called the Day of Atonement. And atonement is making right what has been wrong. Okay, you want to make right what has been wrong. Kind of like, if you think about it in this way, when you break a bone, and I don't know if any of you have broken a bone before. I think I've broken my nose. That's probably why it's crooked. Got kicked in the face when I was younger. But anyway, it wasn't by my sister. But it was during a soccer game, and now I wheeze a little bit. So I think, but I don't know. And the thing is, if you don't set it straight, it grows back crooked. It fixes itself crooked. All right? So when you break something, that's very, very important to be able to make it right. And so that's where you find, just that idea of the Day of Atonement. The people needed to make right for their sin, to make their relationship with God right again. Okay? So they needed to be able to understand that. They needed to mend that relationship with God. That's so very, very important. Any relationship that we have, kids, we need to make sure that we're mending the problems in them. Okay? Because we don't always act the right way. We need to say sorry for the things that we do that's wrong. We need to ask for forgiveness. All right? And so when we disobey, we need to ask our parents forgiveness and to say we're sorry. When we hit our brother in the face, we need to say we're sorry. But don't hit your brother in the face and then say sorry real quick. That's not being sorry. Sorry is when you want to change and you don't want to do that anymore. You feel the wrong and the shame and the guilt by it. All right? So they wanted to make that right. So the high priest was to go into the most holy place to offer sacrifices for the sins of his family and for all the people. So how would they do this? This is very interesting. They'd take two goats. One, they would offer as a sin offering. But the second one, the high priest would lay his hands on the second goat's head to transfer the sins of the people to this goat. And I know it sounds super weird, but it's just a picture. It's a reminder for the people, the removal of their sin, and there had to be a sacrifice. And there was a scapegoat, that they called it, that they would actually take this goat off, the one that they transferred the sins over as a picture. They would touch its head, the sins would transfer, and then they would lead this goat off into the wilderness to give the picture of the removal of the people's sins. So this was the whole idea. There had to be sacrifice, and there was the picture of the removal of their sins. Okay? On that day, God says, on that day, your sin will be paid for. You will be clean from all sins in my sight. Okay? So that's what made them right. That's what made it right again. What was wrong, they made right. Day of Atonement. But they not only on the rules on the priests and the offerings, but he told them how to live. And he says, be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. He wants us to be holy just like him. So we need to remember that. Kids, we need to remember. We need to try to stay as far away from sin as we possibly can. We need to give in to the temptations of doing what's selfish and prideful and hurting other people. He told them not to lie, don't cheat, love your neighbor as yourself, obey these rules that God placed. Now, see, what's the Christ connection for all of this? What does Christ have to do? Well, sacrifices, the sacrifices that they did back then, it was a hint for what is coming in the future. And see, Christ came and he made a sacrifice once for all. All those who trust in him, that sacrifice was done. So we don't have to make sin offerings anymore. Christ was the sin offering. He was the sacrifice for us, so we just need to trust in him for our salvation. I hope you've done that. If not, you can do that today. Just pray and ask God for forgiveness and put your faith in him alone, in his son and what Jesus did for you. All right, so let me ask you a few questions just to summarize it out and make sure you were listening. What could be an offering? Well, there's different types. There was grain, there was animals, there's jewelry, money, there's bread. There's different types of offerings, okay? And what were they used for? Well, they were used either to praise God with a burnt offering or to say sorry for their sin. It was a sin offering, right? Praise God or say they're sorry. What were the goats for atonement? Well, one was supposed to die, and then the other one was supposed to transfer the sins over to it and led away into the wilderness, just like the sin was removed from the people. What was the Day of Atonement for? What was atonement? To make wrong, the things that are wrong, right. To fix things. Okay? And why don't we have this Day of Atonement today? It's because of Jesus. Jesus made things right if we trust in him. He makes things right for us. We don't have to kill any more goats. We don't have to lay our hands on the goat's head to transfer any sins as a picture in our mind. We can trust in Jesus. All right? And how are the offerings we give similar or different from the offerings that were given back in the Old Testament? Well, you've seen that the offering plate goes around on a Sunday morning or a Sunday night. You say, what's that for? Well, we can still give of our time, our talents, our money, of our things, whatever that might be. You know, some people might come and mow the grass because they're good at it. Some people might come and clean the church. Some people might decorate. Some people might go and give their time in evangelization to make sure everybody's got the gospel. Sometimes people just give their money to others. But we bring it in and we collect that and we help other people. We want to use that for the sake of God and his kingdom. Why? Because he wants us to be able to give, to help others, to be able to further the ministry, to further his kingdom for his glory. We could still give that, but we don't have to give sin offerings anymore. We just need to trust in Jesus. Jesus already gave that offering. You know, our offerings are kind of like our praise offerings. When we give that up and sacrifice to God, we just don't burn it up, all right? So I hope you enjoyed that lesson here today. What's your activity? Well, how about you do this? You get your parents and you close your eyes. And then as soon as you close your eyes, your parents gets to move one item in the room. And as soon as they moved it somewhere, then you open up your eyes and you try to guess as quickly as possible which item was wrong. So you go and you take that item and you put it back in its rightful spot. And see how many times you could do that correctly. And what's that for? It's just like the Day of Atonement. We're trying to make things that were in the wrong place right. Right? So I hope you enjoy that. Hope you get into that activity. I hope you enjoy the rain today. And just God's cleansing. Because we can be cleansed through Jesus. You know, just that picture. It's a beautiful picture of what Christ has done for us. I'll talk to you later, kids. Have a good one.